Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammi and Nathan Jaeger.
Hello and welcome to a brand new week of Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about checking in on our life and authoring our future, the invisible load that women often bear in a relationship, and gender stereotypes and how they can be hard to break. But before we get into that, Sammi, what's been fueling you up this week?
We're moving house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope everybody is enjoying a lovely end of year 2021 break.
Yeah.
I think most people have wrapped up their day gig or their job as such, end of last week.
Yeah.
I tied a bow in when did I tie a bow in my year? I don't know. It was a bit of a soft taper out, but
it was the end of last week.
But the thing that has fueled me up the most this past week, amongst the Christmas festivities, has been getting the keys to our new place.
I know. It's pretty exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. If you've listened to the show for a little while, you've probably heard us talk about this desire to move closer to the beach and that we've been wrestling with it. But we pulled the trigger.
It's actually happening.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're going to be a 6 and a bit minute walk to the beach. So although it is probably not the most relaxing, refueling, recharging week, we're moving.
That's it, yeah.
What about you? What's fueled you up the most?
I had a little getaway last week. So I went away with a couple of mates down to Thredbo to go mountain biking for a few days. So that was really good. I haven't been out on the bike for a long time, really. Just had some good fun with mates, riding some challenging trails, kind of pushing my limit of my skills. But yeah, just had a really, really fun time.
We hope that you are all enjoying some rest and relaxation and recharge. The whole premise of Fuel Collective is the idea that we've got these different fuel tanks, and from time to time they need some refueling. And I hope that you're getting the opportunity to take care of your tanks over the next week or two as we close out 2021 and get into 2022.
Yeah. But now here's this week's guest.
Today we've got Paige and Tom Harkin joining us. Paige has spent the last 20 years building her career working on the human condition with a fierce passion and focus on women's rights and equality. Paige spent her uni days studying psychology and is a qualified counsellor. She spent many years working with our most vulnerable people in child protection, family violence, and in Cambodia with women who had been sexually trafficked and orphaned youth due to HIV. After ending a stint in Cambodia feeling burnt out and feeling rather deflated with where the world is, she found herself in an organisation that was working in the preventative space rather than crisis intervention, inspiring and uplifting young people through facilitated workshops. It is here that she met her now husband, Tom, and it was the beginning of a beautiful love story. It was from here they've built a life and family and now 3 successful businesses together, supporting men, women and leaders to question their current reality and ask themselves who they really want to be for tomorrow. Both Paige and Tom have a core reason for starting these businesses that drives their passion forward and is a daily reminder of why they do this work. When Paige isn't in career mode, she is a mum to 2 beautiful boys, has spent many years traveling the world, and has this as one of her highest values to ensure she and her family are constantly creating lasting, memorable experiences. She is also a lover of terrible reality TV, great food, quality time with her kids, and cold ocean dip. Tom has been driven and inspired by a belief that we are here once only, and that no one should miss out on getting to live a full life and wants it all. Tom has exercised this passion through close to 20 years of group facilitation across all age brackets, demographics and sectors, and in most settings from school classrooms to sporting clubs to community town halls and boardrooms. In 2016, Tom's work was featured in the acclaimed docuseries Man Up, which was viewed over 90 million times globally. This created the platform for Tomorrow Collective, a business founded by Tom and his wife, Paige. Through the social enterprise and commercial business, they work with more than 20,000 people per year with the aim of helping people to author their tomorrow, whether it's in business, sport, rural or metropolitan communities, or rewriting narrow gender stereotypes. Tom is authentic, down to earth, understands, and relatable, and these attributes are reflected in the environments he creates, whether in conversation with one person or with 2,000. Tom's proudest achievement was when his wife agreed to spend her life with him, and his most important role in this life is being father to his 2 sons, River and August. Welcome to the show, you two.
Hi.
There's nothing more cringy than listening to your bio.
It's so bad. We hadn't heard each other's. I'm like, I'm just looking the other way.
You two have done some stuff.
Yeah.
Done a few things.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
No worries. So you mentioned in your bio that you met through work. So tell us a bit about that story.
So we both met in an organisation called the Reach Foundation. So it's working with young people, like you mentioned, running facilitated workshops. Tom had been there since he was 17 years old, so had been working there for about 10 years at the time that I started there. And he had been one of the young people running the workshops all the way up to being on the board when I got there. And I started out as a program manager. And Tom was kind of on his way out as I was on my way in. And yeah, it's kind of a funny one. We didn't really have too much to do with each other, but there was this one day where we kind of passed each other in the office. It sounds so cliche, but we both just felt something. I actually really almost saw my future with him, which was crazy and very woo-woo, but it kind of happened. And then, yeah, we had one meeting together and there was just this spark and, yeah, we kind of pursued it after that. And, yeah, now we're married and have 2 kids.
So give us some timeline. When was this? When did you first meet?
Been together 9 years. So what are we doing?
My math's not great.
10 years?
2012.
2012, yeah. So 2012, yeah, we met and we fell pretty deep and hard in love pretty quick.
So you were working together for someone else at that time, but now you work together. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the Tomorrow Collective is made up of 2 businesses and 4 brands. And so it's really a social enterprise, which is Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman, and a commercial business, which is Tomorrow Architects, doing leadership work generally, and Tomorrow Films. And so Tomorrow Films kind of works across all of the businesses. So the collective is really about create tomorrow. And the collective was built on a belief that in the normalized kind of education streams that most of us are exposed to, we don't often get opportunities to reflect on how our lives are actually going and whether they're panning out the way that we would like, and then to be given the tools and resources to be able to author our own tomorrow and to rewrite the narrative if it's not going the way that we want it to be going. And so ultimately that's what we do, even through Tomorrow Films. It's creating these kind of liminal moments where life stops just for a moment and you get to kind of look at how is this all tracking and how do we get here, and is there anything that I want to change, or am I happy and do I just want to kind of continue on? And so in Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman, we often do that through the gendered lens. And we believe that the binary gendered lens is really limited, the stereotype, that it's actually a spectrum. But where we begin is through this kind of, often quite claustrophobic stereotype of a man should be and a woman should be, and expand out from there. The leadership space is similar in many ways. What it takes to be a leader has shifted just so much, from this kind of expert with the track record that tells people what to do and they get off and do it, to a really dynamic holder of space and, holding an environment where everybody's ideas get to the table so you can innovate and find your way through this shifting context that we're all in. And we just don't believe that many leaders get that training through university or any other medium. And so they're the businesses. We work with about 20,000 people a year across Australia. Tomorrow Architects operates globally. We've got 30 staff now and growing. So we've been going 5 years. We're coming to the 5-year mark. And it started with Paige and I and my best mate, Belly. And it's just kind of become like we never really set out. We definitely didn't set out to be here and to have this many staff and to have a business this big. And I think we both kind of talk about if somebody had come along and said, hey, do you want to do this thing and have 30 staff members and a couple of businesses and 4 brands, we would have both probably run for it, away from it.
Yeah.
But I think that that's probably natural. Like you need to kind of acclimatize yourself to the journey and gradually, bit by bit, work out how to do it. And I think that's how we've also gone in our relationship. Like our relationship wasn't capable of handling 30 people in the businesses and stuff. Like we kind of had to build relationship muscle in order to do that, and that needed to be incremental.
Yeah.
And throughout that whole time, Paige birthed our 2 incredible sons as well as the businesses, you know. So
business babies and real babies.
Yeah.
So the reason that the 2 of you have ended up here having this conversation with us is because I didn't even see the whole mini series Man Up. I saw a snippet of, and one of your team, writer Jack, was featured in this, and it grabbed me by my heart. And it was, I saw 2 minutes of it and went, I need to have a conversation with this organization. This is unreal. And then some of you may have heard the episode where we had Ryder on the show talking about masculinity and the lens of shifting it and what does masculinity mean today? How are we evolving? Where do we need to get to? So I just want to take a second to honor, not only do you have these businesses, but they are creating social change in a way that is so needed. So thank you for being brave enough and building the muscle so that you can run the businesses and your 30 team and have a functioning relationship.
Sometimes.
Yeah, no, thank
you.
Yeah. It's pretty humbling to hear it spoken about that way.
Yeah.
So what was the trigger? What was the starting point for the business? Where did that all kind of come from?
It's kind of funny, actually. The way that it came about was, like Tom said, it was fairly organic. It wasn't something we set out to do. So it kind of happened, like you mentioned, Tom featured in a documentary called Man Up, which you just mentioned that you saw. And it happened to launch the exact same week that we had our first child. And the director of that actually contacted Tom and was like, do you have your website kind of up and ready? You know, you might get some attention after this documentary. And we could never have foreseen kind of what happened out the back of that. But basically, the days following the launch of the documentary, Tom's website kind of got inundated with, 500 emails from schools and just other places saying, we need this. And at the time, I was obviously off on maternity leave and had been thinking about wanting to go do work again in the space with women. And Tom was working for somebody else, but had been dreaming up potentially doing something slightly different in the more corporate space. And it just offered this opportunity to kind of do this work with schools and in community. And so it was kind of just one step forward. We're like, okay, do we take this opportunity? Do we kind of decide to do some of this work? Let's just give it a crack. And that's what we did. And then it kind of has just literally iterated and grown from there.
So tell us, you've been building these businesses and while concurrently falling in love and growing your family, and somewhere in there you got married. Tell us a little bit about how you've been managing the working relationship, but then also the romantic relationship.
I think Paige was joking before saying sometimes functional, but it's the truth in that we haven't managed at times, at times it's been really brutal. And I think we both freak our families out a bit and some of our friends in that we talk a lot, pretty deep. And so we've always talked a lot since we met each other and thought a lot about our relationship and what we want it to be. And when we got married, we kind of did our own ceremony in a way. It was a bit of a ritual. We kind of wanted it was that whole thing of what is a marriage? We're not religious. And we wanted that symbolic event. We wanted the big party and the big celebration. We wanted all of our tribes to come together and celebrate. And it was awesome. It was one of the best days of our life. But in the lead up, one of the things that we did was actually to do this little ritual that I'd been working over in Ireland. And I'd gone to a wedding there of some friends, and they had done this little ceremony and it was kind of like, what do you want to pass down through your family lines and what don't you? And it kind of led into our vows. And it was about like, okay, this is something from my family that I want to bring through, and this is something I'd rather stop. And we did that with each of the kids as well. Like, okay, as we're bringing this human into the world, like, what do we want to consciously do to bring into that? But one of the things in our vows that kind of we both said, we didn't know each other's vows, but we both said in a way, I'll just talk to mine because I remember them very clearly. But I said that I promised to always step towards you even when I'm scared. And it was really about saying, like, sometimes when we had been having really tough conversations, it feels scary and you just kind of want to walk away at times rather than towards each other and to continue to have the conversation. And I think we've always held true to that.
Yeah.
Like, even at the times where it's been really challenging, like we lost each other probably at times, where when the businesses came in, interestingly for our businesses, when River came along, we both felt fairly kind of gendered kind of drivers. Like, I felt like we need a home. Like, I need to provide, you know, like there's a kid coming into our world, and I've always been kind of good with money and made sure that I've got just enough. And suddenly I was like, I don't have just enough for a family. Like, I need to get busy. Like, we're not earning enough. We don't even have a house deposit, like all of this kind of stuff. And the business felt like an opportunity for that. I was like, this is an opportunity to really make the mark as a platform here, and we can set our lives up and we can do really meaningful work in the world. And Paige had just birthed a child and was like, well, I want a family. Like, I don't really care about a house. Like, we just birthed a child. I want you here and present. And that was probably our toughest time, where we kind of really went in different ways trying to achieve the same thing ultimately. And so I guess it's a long way of answering the question. It kind of feels like we've done that throughout our entire relationship. We've gone apart, we've come together, we've gone apart, we've come together, but there's always been the glue of intention to step towards each other. And so we've never made it too far apart without the elastic band coming back together and finding a way through. But mainly just through a lot of conversation, a lot of tears, sometimes a bit of yelling, lots of tears, lots of conversation.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched on there that, like, especially when you had a kid, that masculine and feminine kind of started to play into your relationship. So how has that helped shape your relationship to the place it is today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been the same thing. Like, it's an evolving conversation in our relationship. I think before having children, we both expressed not wanting it to be that really gender stereotypical, like, you know, the woman's at home, the man does the work, and we both agreed to that and what that would look like. But the reality of that was, it's interesting, it is the patriarchy. We fell into very stereotypical roles, which has been really challenging at times because we both are conscious of those things, but life doesn't set you up to necessarily go against those. So really what's been most helpful in that is that we have spent a lot of time, both of us starting to understand things like the mental load, the invisible load of mothers and women and what that actually looks like, which is hard to fully comprehend until you're in that role. And then also, so Tom gaining a bigger understanding of that, and then for me to have a greater understanding of the burden of responsibility around income and finances and this pressure to want to set up a home and whatever. So it's, something that we literally have been talking about for 5 years. It's something that we probably only just now are finding more of a flow with and have a better understanding of each other's experience of. And that's taken 5 years of conversation, 2 kids, much like therapy, all sorts of things. But we still both drop the ball on it at times. But it's really, I think the biggest thing has been having an awareness and understanding of each other's experience and being grateful to each other for the contribution we're both making. from those sides. I think when we started to acknowledge and affirm each other for what we were both contributing to the family together has been a huge shift. Whereas before it was like, well, you're doing that, or you're doing that, or I'm doing this and I'm doing that, rather than the coming together.
Hey, Paige, I think it's really interesting what you touched on there, that you both had eyes open and an intention on a certain outcome, but then you've still, even with that intention, been pulled towards your gender norm kind of roles. You used the term invisible load, and this is something that I hear my girlfriends say a lot, but for someone who's never heard that term before, can you try and sum it up a little?
Yeah. So basically, it's got lots of different terms. So the mental load, the invisible load, the silent work that generally a mother holds, or or women in general, actually. So basically what that is it's all the extra stuff that you internally hold for your family or for your relationship. So for example, we have 2 kids. More naturally, I hold most of the mental load in terms of I'm thinking about, what do my kids need to eat? When do they need to have their immunizations? Have we enrolled them into daycare? Have we called my mum to ask her to babysit on the weekend? Have we organised the birthday presents for the party on the weekend? All this kind of extra stuff generally falls to the woman or the primary caregiver of the children. Mm-hmm. It's like a whole other full-time job on top of just caring for the kids at their basic needs. And so there's a phenomenon of women that are incredibly burnt out, because now women in the more in this generation are expected to, or feel pressure to, do it all, which is like, have the career, still be a great mum, but you're also holding all of this extra responsibility, which is the mental load as well.
And Nathan, I'm going to throw you under the bus.
Yeah.
Warning. So we don't have kids. And a frequent phrase in our household, probably more so a few years ago than now, is like, being the project manager is a job.
Yeah.
It's doing is a job, and project managing is a job. So that's like, normally that's my like phrase to Nathan, like, I'm doing all of the organizing and the prepping and the thinking, and you're just doing the doing. I'm doing both.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think even without the complexity of children, I think it does exist when you take 2 gendered people and put them in a house and go, okay, you've got to cook, clean, eat, run some kind of humming household. And if you haven't intentionally examined what roles you're going to play and how that's going to happen, I think even with, like you said, with that intention, they can still fall to, well, that's what our parents did, or that's what our grandparents did, or that's what we've seen in society, that's what we see on TV. When you turn on an ad, it's mum giving the kids the Panadol, or it's the woman in the old El Paso, she's the one in the kitchen. Like just those subtle sort of things. So it's really interesting that even with intention, it's hard to execute 100%.
It's also too that like the messaging we're given is that women can multitask, and that's been debunked. It's actually a false narrative. Men have the same capability to multitask, but you're not told that. Men aren't told that. So women assume, well, I can do all of these things because that's just, I can, but men can't. So I guess he just won't think about all of those things, but it's actually not true. But it takes a lot of work to like actually stop doing the things and break it all down, and and let go of control too, because you can want to hold it but be resentful about holding it all.
And it's also like, I think you were just saying that, Sammi, but the way that society is built, when we had River, all of the doctors spoke to Paige only. There was a mother's group. There was no father's group. And so the mothers are all swapping notes on how to do this thing and swapping their links and their articles and so then all the knowledge of that is held. And unless you intervene to extract the knowledge, like there were times where we were having massive arguments about packing the kids' bags and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I actually need to extract the list. Like I need a list. So when we go on holidays and stuff, Paige would do all the packing, and I was like, I need to get the list off you. so that I've got my list and I know, because it was like.
But then I'd be like, that's the mental
That's
load.
the issue.
Me writing the list.
Me
The list is in here. It's not a physical list.
No one gave me a list.
No, that's right.
Yeah,
But I think that's also been the shift in our relationship in terms of me going, okay, if I keep fighting, just giving the list, we're just going to keep on fighting. So like, okay, I'll
and then
give
I
you
started
the list.
trying to do it incognito. I try and like work out, okay, what's the list, without asking what the list is. I'm still doing it. Like,
Hey, just pack the bag and you've gone and unpacked it. So
Yeah,
you
like,
know what's in there.
what happens? And then, in all honesty, sometimes I'd do it, and then she'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing? What have you packed?" You're like, I tried to pack the bag.
Yeah.
You know,
That's what I mean. You've got to really like. So I've had to check myself in terms of like it's not going to be the way that I do it.
Why are
But
they
that's
wearing
gonna be
those
okay.
clothes?
Why is he wearing pajamas?
What I'm happy to dress him in.
I think there's like a fine line too of like letting your partner experience the consequences of inaction. Like it's a really hard thing to let go, but like if the food shopping doesn't get done or the dishes don't get unpacked and repacked, or the washing machine, this one's a common one in our house because Nate's got a great habit of putting the washing on but then leaving it in there.
Yeah.
Like, so I've had to like let go and be like, I just need to leave the wet washing there so that he can experience
Discover it in 4 days' time.
Of action for leaving wet washing and figure out a system that works for him. But it's towing the line of like what's letting someone fail so they can learn the lesson versus like just being really passive aggressive.
There's definitely been many passive aggressive a couple,
Hey, so we heard in your bio that living a designed life and life with intention and travel is really high on your values, but also correlating with that you kind of found yourself in this business and you've evolved to a point where you couldn't even wrap your head around the thought that you'd be there. So talk to us a little bit about, what do those conversations look like for the two of you when you are future pacing?
Yeah, like I think that at times we've had conversations about what we've wanted, and at times we've actually really differed on that and had to go, I thought we both thought we were on the same page and this is like really different to what we're after. And I recall one time when we were up at the cafe writing stick-it notes and then kind of going like, what do we want out of the next, and then revealing our stick-it notes and actually surprisingly realizing that we were right on the same page in terms of the things that we wanted. So I think we've always like had a similar belief in kind of what we want for our lives and shaping them that way. I mean, one of the things that Paige was talking about before, we had this thing of like when we bring our kids into the world, we want to be there with our kids. And I'd often admired my sister had come home from the UK and her partner was from the UK and had built a career there. So they basically both started from scratch when they got here. They had their first child, Ziggy, and they basically took the first year off. And it was just like, oh, wow, like that's the way to do it, not being pressured and all that kind of stuff. We had no idea that a documentary was going to land on the day that River was born. And so those best laid plans kind of went out the window. And so I think that what we've wanted and how it's happened has always been different. But I think we've both been really precocious maybe in going, let's make our life the way we want it to be because it's too short. Like let's actually do more of what we want and less of what we don't. And so having the businesses is one of the ways of actually doing that. Like kind of going, well, we can decide the work that we do and the work that our businesses do. And a part of it also is looking at the rest of our lives and going, let's make sure we've got more and more freedom the more the years go on to decide on where we spend that and who we spend it with and how we do it. At the same time, like having the businesses at times has been far from our ideal. It's been like, whoa, like these things never stop. And we've got less of what we wanted now than ever before, ironically. When everybody around us was looking at us going, congratulations, life looks amazing. You're so successful. You must be so proud. And we're just like, holy shit. Like our marriage is crumbling and we're stressed out of our brains. We're not sleeping and we never see friends. This is pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And kind of going, and I don't want to talk about the businesses. You know what I mean? Like you'd be rocking up at barbecues and that's what all anybody would want to talk to you about, because there was a perception of, oh my God, guys, it's all happening for you. And kind of being like, all we want to do is escape them, and all we end up talking about is the businesses. Whereas those startup years are hopefully, touch wood, kind of in the past a bit, and things are settling and we're not as stretched and our kids are growing up. And so those intentions for the things that we've wanted are starting to come to roost a little bit more. And there's a lot of gratitude now for what we've been through. And it was tough.
Yeah.
Like we lost a lot of, I think like a lot of entrepreneurs who are naive like we were, we've lost some really important friendships along the way, bringing friends into business and just thinking, no, we can do this. Like, and then realizing, you know, learning the lessons that so many people had written about, you know, the top 10 tips of entrepreneurship. Like number one's always never bring your friends in. and we read all those and went, nah, that's not
Buck the trend.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
I think that's super interesting what you say too, Tom, because I think people have that same perception with relationships. Like you'd have to be under a pretty big rock to not know that the divorce rate is like around about 50%. And yet we all go into it thinking, couldn't possibly be us.
Yeah.
1 in 2 wouldn't be us.
Yeah.
Like, so that naivety, I think, is we have to experience some pain to even know that it could even be a possibility. But yeah, Nathan and I have this pretty like morbid kind of idea that at some point your relationship or you are going to have an asteroid, whether or not it's consequences of some financial decisions, one of you is going to get sick, redundancy, like something big is going to happen in your family. One of those things that happens to other people will happen to you. So I think holding your relationship in a place where it's in good health and fueled up before that asteroid hits is kind of what we're endeavoring to do, is empowering couples to go, hey, we could be one of those 50%. Let's do some work so that we don't become that 50% rather than waiting for that potential asteroid that might kick you while you're already vulnerable and fractured and things are already feeling hard. But what I would love to know is a little bit more practically, what do you do now to keep your relationship fueled up?
I think before talking about what we do now, Paige mentioned it before, but like I think now maybe it'll happen again. But I feel like an asteroid's really hit our relationship in terms of the businesses. And we didn't really see that coming. And if we hadn't kind of been really open to relationship counselling and had a really solid relationship counsellor that we continue to access at kind of tremor moments in our relationship, we wouldn't have made it through probably. I mean, there were points where we both definitely went, are we becoming one of those stats? Like, is that what's happening here? And so I think that having a support system is just so important. And for us, the support system has been one, we've been lucky that we've always talked. We've always unpacked things a lot. And so that was a muscle of ours. But as good as we were at it, we needed objective help. Because sometimes it got so heated and so blinding that, as Paige said, we couldn't see past our own version of how life should be going. And we just weren't seeing or acknowledging the value that the other was bringing, and realising that those diverse offerings were actually making a whole. Kind of like, no, you need to be over here with me doing this because this is the way it's supposed to be. And the other one going, no, you need to be over here with me doing this because this is, rather than, oh no, we're actually kind of looking after the whole thing. So I think those have been non-stop pieces for us.
Yeah.
And I think then also the willingness to grow together, to not be the people that we married, to actually realise, hey, we've changed since that moment. You know, like getting over the honeymoon was hard for us because we had a long honeymoon and it was so electric and all of those kind of things. And then it was like, hang on a second, where's all those like extra thoughtful things that we were doing for each other? And where's all the electricity and where's all that stuff, which everybody goes through. But the willingness to actually to go, hey, I'm blinded by my male privilege. I actually don't understand this. And I need to educate myself. And maybe the next phase of our life will look different in our roles and we'll change things up. So I think those three things, like the ability to talk, the need for objective support systems, the relationship strength doesn't rely on just you two, and the willingness to reimagine each other and your relationship and to allow it to evolve. That they've been like oil to the machine of our lives rather than what we do now.
I'd also just add the other thing, like Tom mentioned it before, but we're very like good at honouring things. So we do like ceremonial points in time of big moments in our life. We really are conscious about going, hey, this is a moment that's big and important. Let's do something with that. So like, for example, we were talking earlier about naming, changing my name. And if we decide to reintroduce like the names together, we'll do something for that. We'll make sure we do a ritual or a ceremony or something around that. So we just, prioritize the symbolism of things, I think. But I just think ultimately the biggest thing is what Tom said before, which is we literally do always step towards each other, even when it is at its most dire and we might think it's at its end. We both always go, no, we said we weren't going to do this. We step back towards, even if it's to have the most difficult conversation.
Yeah, I love those things. And I love the point that you touched on, Tom, about growing together and growing as human beings. I think life would be pretty boring if we stayed exactly the same people that we were when we met each other. Like, how quickly would you kind of, would the spark burn out if we didn't change or if we didn't grow, if we didn't evolve? So I think that's a really, really important point to touch on.
One of the things that we have probably done, which at times we felt a bit like insecure about, is we have always really prioritized time for our relationship. And so amongst friends of ours, we have a lot of friends who have had children and they haven't spent any time together alone in 2-3 years. And we've always been big on making sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. And so as much as at times we might feel like, are people judging this? Like, we hand our kids over to the village and kind of say, Mum and Dad, like, look after them. We try and do that fairly regularly so that we can rediscover our foundation together. And I think everybody's heard the stories, and we've got close mentors that have said, okay, the kids have now flown the coop, and we're like, holy shit, like, who are we again? Like, are we still, like, does this still work without the kids here? Like, do we still have something without them? And I hope that because of our prioritization of our time together, getting to that point hopefully won't be as much of a question mark. It'll be like, we'll keep it tight, regardless of the incredible human beings we've brought into our orbit. We've prioritized our relationship because that's where it all began. And it's the core.
I think that's such solid advice, recommendation, story sharing, because like from that relationship and network, like if you looked at your circle of the couples that I'm sure you want them to succeed. And if you knew that an ingredient that they needed to succeed was for you to babysit once a month, once a quarter, you'd put your hand up. Yeah. So I think if you can build a network, and you have to nurture that network and you earn those things. But I think if you can build that community and network where that's totally normal and we're all rooting for each other to succeed in life and in relationships and for kids, like you can support each other to have those things, and that little question mark of like, we're being judged for this, like, let's just support each other so that we can all have this great thing, because that's why these kids are even here.
Exactly.
I think sometimes there's a bit of a burden of perfection. Like in terms of the perfect way to parent. And at times I think that some of that comes down to a guilty feeling of like, did you choose to be a parent? Because if you did, then you should be with your kids all the time. And it's kind of like, we chose to parent, but we also out here on the grass when River turned 1, we had our whole tribe here and kind of said like, hey, he's yours as well. You know, like you're all the important people to us. And we don't want to be the only influencers in this kid's life. And so we want to be able to hand him over. And we're better for it. He's better for it. Like we had the guilt of like sending him to daycare and stuff like that. And there were times where we were like, man, they're so much better at this than we are. Like,
who would have thought early childhood educators educating early children?
It's like he comes home with all these skills and like good habits. And I'm like, we need to send him there more often. Like, he's at risk with us. I do think that it's a belief system that needs to be worked through, and the willingness to go, like we're going to pay a babysitter to come and hang out with our child so that we can get these moments so that he gets a better mum and dad on the other side of that few hours.
And Nathan and I talk about that in the context of Fuel Collective, is that's the fuel, that quality time together, that's the fuel putting back into your relationship. But to talk to your point about the network and are we being judged and all that side of thing, like it takes vulnerability to ask for help. And I think that's the part that we are actually struggling with. It's not like, oh, someone else can't handle my kid or my life or whatever. It's actually, we can't handle owning up and saying, I need help with this, please. And same for what you were saying about engaging a counsellor to support your marriage. Like that takes vulnerability to even say, do you know what? We've got a problem here that the two of us can't solve. We need another resource, and that comes in the shape of a third-party perspective, which can be huge, but it takes a lot of vulnerability to even acknowledge that we're at our depth here. So I applaud you for doing that and also for sharing it with us so that hopefully anyone who's listening who might be on that tipping point, just do it. Go. If you are sick, if you are hurting, go to a doctor. This is the same.
Yeah, it's the best thing you do. And even if you're not struggling, there's never not a helpful outcome of speaking to someone.
And also I think that like you're so blinded by the people that you're the closest to. Like in some ways, it's like we spend a lot of our time running workshops around self-awareness and, you know, understanding your emotional life and your reactivity and inner drivers and all that kind of stuff. And then with each other, it just goes out the window because we're so close to each other. It's like there's not enough distance to have perspective sometimes. And I think having a referee, a wiser referee to stepping out, I'm seeing some stuff here, guys. Can you see this stuff? Oh, yeah, maybe.
They say that though, like the painter with the unpainted house.
Totally.
Hey, you two, this has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Nathan and I talk about being the change and taking accountability for ourselves and what we have influence over to change in our own lives. But we also talk about being the change in the greater big wide world, which you're both doing in your businesses and for yourselves. To say thank you, we've given a contribution to the Rainforest Rescue so that they can protect a square metre of the Daintree rainforest. Our climate's in pretty dire straits. So we're taking some urgent action to try and combat some climate change and its impact. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Thank you.
It's
amazing.
No worries. So Paige and Tom, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about the Tomorrow Collective, how should they do that?
Yeah, so they can find us at tomorrowwoman_AU or tomorrowman_AU on Instagram, or just tomorrowman or tomorrowwoman on Facebook is probably the best way to connect with us.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.